plutonium happens to be the preferred choice for nuclear explosives and atomic bombs. Most of the nuclear weapons in the world today use plutonium. And as a matter of fact, when they talk about dismantling warheads, what they're talking about is taking the plutonium out of the warhead. Once you take the plutonium out of the warhead, they're harmless. They can't explode, except in a conventional sense. They can't create a nuclear explosion. So that plutonium is the key ingredient, and every nuclear reactor produces plutonium, which happens to have a half-life of 24,000 years. Now, when they talk about a nuclear renaissance, you see, there's a kind of a firewall that separates the reactor from the bomb. And that firewall is the intense radiation of the spent fuel. If you wanted to make a bomb out of the plutonium, you have to get the spent fuel, but the spent fuel is so radioactive it's going to kill you. Therefore, you have a protection against using the spent fuel for bombs, and that's what people in the nuclear industry are always saying. You can't use the plutonium from a nuclear reactor for bombs, it'll kill you first. Well, the problem is that the nuclear industry, in order to survive and continue, and in order to build thousands of nuclear reactors, in order to be successful, which they have not been up to now, in order to be successful, they want to replace that firewall with something called a reprocessing plant. And the R stands for reprocessing, which is also stands for recycling, which also stands for nuclear renaissance. When they talk about a nuclear renaissance, they know that they're not going to have enough uranium to fuel all the reactors in order to make a big difference. So what they want to do is they want to take the irradiated fuel from the reactor, run it through this robotic plant called a reprocessing plant, and separate that plutonium from all those dangerously radioactive fission products. And once they separate that plutonium, it can then be recycled as fuel in nuclear reactors. The difficulty is, once it's separated, it can equally well be recycled out the back door into bombs. So that you cannot have a nuclear renaissance without making plutonium in a separated form much more available. This is inevitably going to increase the proliferation of nuclear weapons. They're like Siamese twins. And the reprocessing plant is the key. Now, this is a very important thing to realize, because when, 5 minutes, when Renane talks about the disposal of radioactive waste by burying it underground, she said, and she's simply repeating what everybody else says, that the industry has been wanting to bury this stuff underground. That's not really true. That's what the industry says they want to do. But what they really want to do is they want to reprocess it. So before they bury the stuff, what they want to do is get it together in one site. And then when they've got it at one site, then they want to reprocess it before they bury the fission products, which are all those hundreds of other highly radioactive things. They want to get the plutonium out. And by the way, that makes the prospect very dangerous for the community that accepts such a facility, because they think they're getting a burial system, and what they're really getting is a reprocessing plant, which is one of the most dangerous parts of the whole nuclear fuel cycle. And the plutonium lifespan, 24,000 years, well, that's only a half-life, so 500,000 years, you know, 500,000 years is nothing. This is the amazing thing. When you build a nuclear reactor and run the reactor, what the reactor really produces is high-level radioactive waste, which lasts forever, and plutonium, which lasts essentially forever also. And that means we're making a legacy not only of poisonous waste long into the future, but we're also making a legacy of nuclear weapons, explosive material long into the future. Anybody can go to where a nuclear reactor was operating before and dig up that buried waste and use it to make bombs by getting the plutonium out of it. And so that we are literally planting the seeds of our own destruction. And a lot of people are becoming more aware of this. I just came back from Basel, Switzerland, where the 19th World Congress of the Global Congress of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War had their 19th Congress. They won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985. And these are 600 doctors from around the world who were present. And they passed a resolution by the board of directors calling on a ban for all uranium mining worldwide. That because, you know, getting this stuff out of the ground is only causing grief for untold millennia to come. Now, the reason why the plutonium can be separated and used safely is because it gives off what's called alpha radiation. Alpha radiation is non-penetrating radiation, but once it gets inside your body, it's 20 times more damaging than the more penetrating gamma and beta radiation. So that it's 20 times more damaging per disintegration, not per disintegration, but per energy. It turns out that the alpha particles are also 10 times more energetic than the beta particles. So by the time you finish, every disintegration of an alpha emitter is approximately, roughly speaking, about 200 times more damaging per disintegration than a beta emitter or a gamma emitter. 200 times. That's why these substances are so toxic, and yet they can be safely handled if they're contained, because that radiation will not go through a piece of paper, and yet it'll damage you terribly once it's inside your body. So here at the Bruce Peninsula has 8 nuclear reactors at the Bruce Nuclear Complex. These figures are a little bit out of date. The 8 is correct, however. And they're refurbishing them right now, as you heard. When they refurbish them, all these pipes and everything in the reactor, in the so-called primary part of the reactor where the primary coolant operates, becomes very radioactively contaminated because those fission products get deposited throughout the pipes. As a matter of fact, recently, last year, 200 workers were exposed to a radioactive dust which they inhaled, and they were told by the Bruce authorities that they didn't need, that there was no radiation, they didn't need to wear protective equipment or anything. And as a result, they were all, 200 men were contaminated. It was weeks before they made the measurements they should have made at the very beginning. And it was alpha radiation that they were contaminated with. These are all different kinds of radioactive waste. What Bernane was talking about was the high-level waste. But all the pipes and the rags and the mops and the clothes and even the filters and everything, that all becomes radioactive waste. And so there's all kinds of radioactive waste. Low-level radioactive waste, they call it, but there's no definition for that either. In fact, anything that isn't high-level waste, which is the irradiated fuel, they automatically just call it low-level waste. Well, that's a hell of a definition. And here we have buried pieces of equipment. Those pieces of equipment will be dangerous for thousands of years. Now, one of the pieces of equipment that they have is the boiler. The boiler, which is also called a steam generator, where the water comes from the core of the reactor, and inside the boiler, that's where it creates the steam that's used to turn the turbine and generate electricity. Well, each one of these boilers gets very contaminated with radioactivity. They say, oh, it's low levels of radioactivity. Don't worry about it. Here are some different types of boilers for different types of nuclear power plants. Here are the types of boilers for Canadian reactors. This is the Pickering type of boiler, the Bruce boiler. This is a little man here to give you the scale. And there's the Bruce reactors. This is the Gentil 2 reactor. By the way, this is the same as for Pointe-le-Pro. Isn't it funny that Bruce Power is removing their steam generators and replacing them, and Pointe-le-Pro isn't? Why isn't Pointe-le-Pro replacing their steam generator? You know why? It would cost too much money. It would kill them. But the thing is that if they refurbish the Pointe-le-Pro reactor and get it running again, this thing is going to eventually have to be replaced anyway. So after they get this thing up and running, it's going to have to be shut down again after 10 or so years to replace the steam generator. That's going to cost hundreds of more millions of dollars.
2 extra more minutes.
2 extra more minutes. There's a picture of a steam generator from Bruce. This is what it looks like inside. It's got thousands of pipes. Each steam generator has about 5,000 pipes. This is called a tube bundle. 5,000 tubes, and each one of those tubes is, inside the tube, is contaminated with like scale from a kettle, but it's all radioactive crap. And this is the stuff that they want to send. Here they're putting a guy inside the steam generator. Why? Because these steam generators get old and corroded and the pipes start breaking, and when the pipes break, the radioactivity leaks into the steam and goes out into the atmosphere. So what they do is they send people up into the steam generators to, quick, don't spend very long, quick, go in there and plug those pipes and then come back out again and run for it. That's what they do in order to keep them operating, but now they're so corroded that they have to replace them completely. So they want to send them from Owen Sound, Ontario, which is on Georgian Bay, through Georgian Bay, down through the St. Clair River and the Detroit River, and that's Lake St. Clair there, and then through to Buffalo here, and then all the way up the St. Lawrence Seaway, all the way over to Sweden. And they're going to ship 16 steam generators, 1,600 of these tons of this radioactive waste. Up until August of 2008, all of the authorities in Canada said that they were not going to do this. They all said that we are going to store these things as radioactive waste on site in perpetuity. We're never going to ship them off site. Now they've changed the tunes. So the result is that they're having hearings on this next week, and there are 77 interveners. One of the interveners happens to be a representative, the executive director of the Great Lakes Mayors Association, and he's written a wonderful brief, and he's explained that, among other things, the shipment of these 16 steam generators exceeds the international recommendation for the maximum amount of radioactivity you can put on one shipment by over 50 times. So it's more than 50 times higher than the maximum amount of radioactivity that's recommended by the International Atomic Energy Agency as a maximum. That means that each individual steam generator would exceed the limit. They couldn't even send one of these steam generators, let alone 16. That's the nature of the hearing we're having in Ottawa next week. Now, this is a list of some of the contaminants. I want to show you that, for example, there are 4 plutonium isotopes here. There's actually 5, but they left one out. This is neptunium, americium, curium. These are all elements which are heavier than uranium and which have been created by neutron activation. You know, when the neutron hits the uranium atoms, they become heavier. And they're all highly toxic alpha emitters. And if you look at the percentages, it turns out that 15% roughly of all the becquerels, the becquerels are the disintegrations per second. This is measured in megabecquerels. A megabecquerel is 1 million disintegrations every second. Imagine 1 million disintegrations every second, okay? And this is measured, so this is 66,900 megabecquerels, right? And that's nickel-63, a radioactive form of nickel. So this is the stuff that they're sending through the Great Lakes. And a lot of this material has half-lives that are in the thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years, or hundreds of thousands of years, or at least centuries. So our time is up?
Come pull it together.
Okay, I'll just pull it together. This is going over to the Baltic Sea, which is the most radioactive body of water in the world because of all the nuclear facilities around it. This is a map of all the nuclear facilities. It turns out that the place where the steam generators are going, I don't think it's on the map here, but it's inside here somewhere. I think it's in around here. And it's a company called Studsvik. That company releases 1,000 times as much strontium-90 into the Baltic Sea as all the other nuclear facilities combined. And this is the company which is going to be receiving the steam generator. So this man is Oleg Bodrov, who is going to be winning the this year's Nuclear Free Futures Award in New York City next week. And he told me a lot about this because he found the Russians started melting down radioactive metal in 2001. And he blew the whistle, and as a result, he was attacked by anonymous attackers and ended up in the hospital for 3 months recovering. But it's dangerous to speak about these things. This is the bottom line. The bottom line is that nobody in the entire world wants radioactive metal. And all the steel manufacturing associations and everybody who's written about this says this radioactive contamination of our metal supply is horrible. And this is recommendations of monitoring. This is from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe back in 2006. They were already flagging the problem of radioactive metal. Radioactive substances have become associated with scrap metal. That's exactly what we're doing. We're sending the stuff over there so that they can melt it down and you will have radioactive metal being circulated into the market. It's a very expensive and dangerous thing. So the bottom line here is that they call it recycling, but in fact what it is a criminal act. What they're doing is they're putting radioactive material, which nobody wants, into a perfectly good product, scrap metal, and then pretending that it's all healthy. So this is the kind of company we're dealing with. And I have to warn you that this is only the tip of the iceberg because this is where the industry is going with their radioactive waste. They actually don't want to bury it. They actually don't want to contain it. They want to disperse it.